This is the little video for ancient and medieval history for Thursday, the 15th of April 2021. Um, and we have just moved seats, so we'll see if the new seats work out. Where we were was talking about Islam. We had talked about the desert and its character. We had talked about the city of Mecca and its place in the Hejaz, northwestern Arabia. We had talked about the Kaaba and young Mohammed and the words that he believed came through the angel Gabriel from the mouth of God. We talked about how Muhammad wrote the holy book of Islam, the Quran, in one voice, his own, presumably from Gabriel, from God, in one language. This makes it different from the Jewish scriptures, which are developed over a couple thousand years, and the language develops along with the story. So some of the earliest bits of Hebrew scripture are written in a form of Hebrew that doesn't even have vowels. The Christian scriptures are even more all over the place, written in languages that Jesus never spoke. So there's always room for interpretation. Well, in Islam, yeah, of course, like any religion, there's room for interpretation. But there's a lot clearer original source in that it's in 7th century Arabic in the writing of the Prophet Muhammad. So Islamic scholars in some ways have an easier time of it because they don't have to play around with, well, what does this Greek word mean? What might Jesus have meant in Aramaic? What will it translate to into English? Because the only official version of the Quran is in the Arabic. That means that all believers need to learn Arabic. We talked about how Muhammad had to flee, that's the Hijra, from Mecca to avoid being killed by a mob. How he escaped through the desert with his small group of followers and ended up in Medina. How he became a chief citizen of Medina, then the ruler of Medina, building the first mosque, setting up the first call of the Muzayin, the prayer singer, on their minarets, calling Allahu Akbar. We talked about the duty of a Muslim to pray facing Mecca 6 times a day. Mecca is roughly in that direction. Because Mecca becomes the great holy city of Islam. Why? Well, after taking control of Medina, the men of Medina are marshaled into an army by Muhammad and sent against Mecca. God cleanses the Kaaba of the demon and devilish taint. And because of this, God has touched the world in a unique fashion there. So the Kaaba is the center of Islamic worship in Mecca, which is the center of Islamic worship worldwide. Once in their lifetime, every Muslim man is expected to go to Mecca, to go what is called on Hajj, and spend the holy month of Ramadan in the holy city, and personally see the Kaaba. And I believe Ramadan is going on right now, so I believe that there are a lot of people who are there right now. We also talked a bit about Sharia law, which is Islamic law. Sharia law, or Shariat law, has an interesting answer to thieving. By the way, despite the whole seating plans, the fan bothers you somewhere. Change your mind. Just move. Just put it on the other side. Thank you. If you're caught thieving and convicted, chop chop goes the hand. If you're caught thieving a second time, you lose both hands. If you are guilty of blasphemy, you can be beheaded. If you're guilty of many other serious crimes, the chop will come to your neck. If you are a Muslim man whose child has given up the faith, to protect the family honor, you are entitled to kill that family member, lest they bring dishonor to your family. These are called honor killings. If you wish, you may marry a child. Mohammed himself had a child wife, one of several. Sharia law is a religious code of law that is used today by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, by the Islamic Republic of Iran, and by several other states ruled by Islamic fundamentalists or Islamists. There's a difference between a Muslim, which is a follower of Islam, the word Islam meaning submission to God, and an Islamist or an Islamic fundamentalist. An Islamist or an Islamic fundamentalist wants to return the world to what it was when Muhammad lived. So wants a return to a time when things were simpler, to a time when the faith is pure as it is in the Quran, without any taint of Westernism or of modernism or of anything like that. So that is, in some ways, what the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia wants. In a very, very, very different way, it's what the Iranians want. And there are terrorists all over the world that are willing to die, fight, and kill for the return of the world to an Islamic caliphate that Muhammad personally would have recognized. Slavery is also permitted in Sharia law. Now, when Muhammad sends the men of Medina back to Mecca, Mecca being the holy city of Islam, is going to remain only Muslim. So the people of Mecca are given three choices. They can go back to, or they can leave Mecca and go to another place. We're not going to help you. We're not going to hinder you either. If you can make it across the desert somewhere else, great. Or we'll kill you right now. Or you can become a Muslim and join us. And many Meccans chose to join. Many chose to leave. A few chose to die. In general terms, Sharia law permits people of the book, Jews and Christians, to live in Islamic territory, just not in Mecca. But if you live there, you're a kafir or a kufar, depending upon the dialect you're speaking. You're an unbeliever. And unbelievers are not citizens. They have fewer rights, they pay higher taxes, they have more burdens, and more restrictions and regulations. If, for example, you're in a dispute with an Islamic neighbor, the Islamic neighbor will always win. If you are on the street and some Muslim man decides to make you a slave, he'll put his hand on your shoulder, take you to the slave market, and you're expected to submissively go. So it's an interesting law code that is tolerant to a limited degree of people who also worship God, Jews and Christians, even if they worship God wrong. Now you decide which is worse, a heathen pagan who doesn't worship God at all, who worships demons that pretend to be gods, or a person who worships the one true God falsely. Because that is a question that any religious fanatic of any religion has to answer. Is it worse to have a religion totally alien, or is it worse to have a religion that's very close to yours but is different in some little way? So they're close to the truth, but they're also way, way, way not in the truth. We talked about how the name of God is Allah, which comes from Yahweh and Jehovah, meaning the name of God given to Moses. And we talked about halal, which is the dietary code that Muslims must follow, which is quite similar to the Jewish kosher dietary laws. Jews and Muslims are not allowed to eat pig of any kind. No pork, no bacon, no ham, none of that. I don't know what other restrictions there are in halal. I know that proper kosher does not involve shellfish, and proper kosher does not involve eating meat and dairy at the same time. So no cheeseburgers. but I'm not sure if halal is quite the same way. And I told you how Muhammad spent the last years of his life conquering Arabia. How as a king, a judge, a general, and a warrior, Muhammad did things that made other Muslims follow in his footsteps. In Christianity, a little old lady could take a look at a crusader who's going off to fight for Christ, and she can rightly ask him, when in the Bible did Jesus go off and fight a war? What would Jesus do? WWJD. What would Jesus do? I think the angriest Jesus got in the Bible was at the money changers, where he yelled at them and threw their tables over. And yet you're thinking of going to kill for Christ? In Christianity, the moderate can shame the extremist, because the life of Christ is not the life of a king or a general, a judge, a warrior, as well as a prophet. The life of Jesus was the life of a teacher, a healer, a sacrifice, and a revelation. It's a totally different thing. Jesus willingly dies a criminal's death on the cross. He allows himself to be killed. Mohammed spreads the faith by conversion of the sword through Jihad, which is the word for holy war. So the example of Mohammed can have the moderate be shamed by the extremist. Little accountant guy, what have you done? What have you done to struggle for God? What have you done to spread the faith? What risks have you undergone? Have you taken part in jihad? If so, how? What? When? These are very personal questions. But the life of Muhammad is not the life of a peaceful teacher. And that is why Islam, in the medieval sense, does have a violent side. And it's why, for the last 30-odd years, of all the conflicts, the armed conflicts that happen in the world, the vast majority, 80 to 90%, involve Muslims in one way, shape, or form. Because of the connection between the present and the time of Muhammad, which was a time of religious war, and because of the example of Muhammad and the other great Islamic leaders who are admired, who fought for the faith. There are moderate Muslims. Those moderate Muslims are interested in a peaceful variant of Islam, where jihad means self-struggle. It means the struggle to improve and reform your life, to give up smoking, and stuff like that. But unfortunately, in Islamic society, if you vary too much from what some extremists believe is the true word, you can have a fatwa leveled on you. Somebody in authority somewhere can mark you for death. In the 1980s, a British Muslim named Salman Rushdie wrote a book that challenged a lot of Islam called the Satanic Verses. And he purported to have revealed certain verses influenced by the adversary, the evil one, Shaitan, in the Holy Quran, which is blasphemous. Now, I compare his book to a book by a Greek Christian, or Greek named Nikos Kazantzakis. That book is The Last Temptation of Christ. In The Last Temptation of Christ, Jesus is not the figure of the Gospels. Jesus is very much a fallible, flawed man. Kazantzakis' book, like Rushdie's book, is considered blasphemous by many people who are of the faith. They made a movie of The Last Temptation of Christ, which I saw, having walked through several lines of protesters who thought that it was a devilish movie. I disagree. But at no point was Kazantzakis put on trial for death by Christians. At no point was he hunted down by Christian assassins. His book is a book that is interesting for anyone who's wrestling with faith. And many Christians are willing to acknowledge that, or at least consider the possibility. The Iranians, on the other hand, placed a fatwa on Salman Rushdie in the mid to late 1980s as an enemy of the faith. And since then, he's been in hiding because Islamic assassins have been after him since then. with the intent of killing him in the name of God. So there are some difficulties with Islam as regards peaceful coexistence. And it has to do with the very old-style nature of the Islamic faith. Those Muslims who wish to modernize the religion, make it more peaceful, more tolerant, more secular, to have it go through a reformation like Christianity does 500 years ago when the Protestants and the Catholics fought, are often threatened with fatwas, are often beaten in the streets in Islamic societies in Muslim cities. That's a problem. And I don't have any ready solutions. I'm not a Muslim. It's not really my business beyond a certain. But as a human being on this earth who would like to see reasonable peace and prosperity between peoples where possible, it's something that will need to be tended to if we are ever to have genuine peace between the modern world and the Islamic world. We'll see. Now, near the end of his life, and at the end of his life, Islam goes through its first great division. And I'll be pausing it here because I'm going to be playing a video. Please get the lights, Emma, and the shades.